Why did Jesus kill 2,000 pigs? The demoniac of the Gadarenes explained. It is night on the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee. The water is finally calm. Hours ago, this same sea tried to swallow a fishing boat whole. Waves breaking over the sides, grown men screaming, a carpenter asleep on a cushion in the stern. You know that story. The storm, the rebuke, the silence. But almost nobody asks the question that comes next. Why was that boat crossing the sea at all? Because on the far shore, up in the limestone hills, there is a graveyard. And from that graveyard, a sound rolls down over the water. Night after night, a sound the fishermen on the western shore have heard carried on the wind and pretended not to hear. Not an animal, not the wind. A human voice, howling among the tombs, and the boat is heading straight toward it. Now, before you decide you already know this story, let me be clear about something. This is not a ghost story. This is not a metaphor. This is not a parable Jesus told to make a point. This is an event recorded in 3 separate Gospels on a real shoreline you can stand on today. A place where the hills drop so steeply into the water that there is only one spot on the entire lake where what happens next could physically happen. And here is the strangest part, the part that should bother you. Jesus crosses that sea, through a storm violent enough that professional fishermen thought they were going to die, to meet exactly one person. One. He performs one act, and then he gets back in the boat and leaves. No crowd, no sermon on a hillside, no overnight stay. By every measure you and I would use, the trip looks like a failure. It wasn't. But you won't see why until the end of this video, in a detail buried 2 chapters later that most people read right past. Hold that thought. We will come back to it. First, you need to meet the man in the tombs. Luke tells you he had not worn clothes for a long time. Mark tells you where he lived, and the Greek word Mark chooses is quietly devastating. The word is katoikesis. It means a dwelling, a residence, a home. It is the word you would use for a house with a door and a table and a lamp, and Mark uses it for a graveyard. This man's home address was among the dead. Think about what it takes for a human being to end up there. Nobody is born in the tombs. He had a childhood once, a mother who called him in for dinner, maybe a trade, maybe a wife, maybe children. The Gospels don't say, and the silence is its own kind of grief. Somewhere along the way, something entered his life and began to take it apart, piece by piece, until the person his family remembered was gone and something else was looking out through his eyes. And you need to understand, his community did not abandon him quickly. Mark records the evidence of how hard they tried. He had often been bound with shackles and chains. Often. That word tells you there were attempts. Plural. Family members, maybe, or men from the town, coming out again and again, restraining him for his own safety, hoping this time it would hold. It never held. He tore the chains apart. He broke the shackles into pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. And so, eventually, no one came anymore. They did what people still do with suffering they cannot fix. They moved it out of sight. They gave him to the graveyard and went back to their lives, and the only proof he still existed was the sound. Night and day, Mark says, he was in the tombs and in the hills, crying out and cutting himself with stones. Sit with that image for a second. A man alone in the dark, surrounded by the dead, taking sharp rocks to his own body. Whatever was inside him was not content to isolate him. It wanted to destroy him, slowly, publicly, within earshot of everyone who had given up. That is who is standing on the shore when the boat scrapes onto the gravel. And this is where the story starts moving fast. Because the man doesn't hide from Jesus. He runs at him. Down from the tombs, across the open ground, straight at the group of exhausted, storm-soaked disciples. Peter, James, John, men who a few hours earlier thought the sea would be the thing that killed them. Imagine standing on that beach in the dark and watching this figure come. But he doesn't attack. He falls down, and then a voice comes out of him that is not entirely his. "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Stop. Notice what just happened. This is Gentile territory. Nobody on this side of the lake knows who Jesus is. His own disciples, in the boat, had just asked each other, 'Who is this, that even the wind and sea obey him?' They didn't have the answer yet. The thing in the tombs did. The first voice on the eastern shore to correctly identify Jesus is a demon, and it is terrified. Then Jesus does something he does nowhere else in all four Gospels. He asks it a question. What is your name? Not a command. A question. And you have to ask why. Jesus does not need information. He has just silenced a storm with a sentence. No, that question is not for him. It is for the man. Because when everything else has been stripped away, your clothes, your home, your family, your mind, your name is the last thing you own. It is the last proof that you are a person and not a problem. This man's community stopped using his name years ago. He was just the demoniac, the screamer, the thing in the tombs. Jesus lands on that shore and asks, in effect, who are you underneath all of this? And the answer that comes back is one of the most chilling lines in the Bible. My name is Legion, for we are many. If this story has ever gripped you and you want more of the Bible explained the way it was actually heard 2,000 years ago, take 1 second and subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel, and there is a detail coming in the next few minutes that almost nobody talks about. And when we get to the end, I have a question for you in the comments. All right, back to that beach. My name is Legion. Here's what most people miss. Legion is not a spiritual word. It is not Hebrew. It is not Aramaic, and it appears nowhere in the Old Testament. Legion in the Greek, is a Latin loanword, a military term. A legion was the basic unit of the Roman army, roughly 5,000 to 6,000 soldiers, armored, organized, unstoppable. It was the machine that had conquered the known world, and it was, at that very moment, occupying the land this story takes place in. So when the man opens his mouth and says, my name is Legion, every first-century listener felt two things at once. The horror of a man occupied by thousands of unclean spirits, and the horror of a homeland occupied by thousands of foreign soldiers. Mark, writing this gospel, chose to keep that word. He wanted you to hear both, and it gets stranger. Do you know which Roman legion was stationed in this exact region? History does. The 10th Legion, Legio Decima Fretensis, the legion that would later burn Jerusalem to the ground. Roman soldiers carried standards, emblems, symbols on their shields and banners, and the emblem of the 10th Legion, attested on their standards and even stamped on their coins and roof tiles, was a boar, a pig. Hold that in your mind, because look at what happens next. The spirits beg Jesus not to send them out of the region. Luke adds that they pleaded not to be ordered into the abyssos, the abyss, the deep prison. The word tells you they know exactly who they are talking to and exactly what he has the authority to do. These are not negotiations between equals. This is a surrender asking for terms. And on the hillside above them, a herd of about 2,000 pigs. Now pause and ask the obvious question. What are 2,000 pigs doing here at all? You are reading a Jewish book. Leviticus chapter 11 declares the pig unclean. No Jewish community keeps them. But this is the Decapolis, the League of 10 Cities. The historian Josephus describes this region for us. Greek-speaking, Gentile, thoroughly Roman in culture, sitting right across the water from Galilee like another world. On this shore, pigs are not an abomination. Pigs are the economy. The spirits beg to enter the herd. Jesus gives permission with. And this detail matters. A single word of consent, no ritual, no struggle, no incantation. The being that tore iron chains apart needs Jesus' permission to enter livestock. And the entire herd, 2,000 animals, rushes down the steep bank into the sea and drowns. Pay attention to this. A legion marked by the sign of the boar, occupying territory that does not belong to it, driven into the sea and destroyed. If you were a first-century reader living under Roman occupation, you did not need a footnote. You would have laughed, or wept, or both. Mark is showing you a power confrontation. There is a legion in this land, the story whispers, that Rome knows nothing about, and there is a king who outranks them all. But now watch what happens next, because this is where the story turns its eyes on you. The herdsmen run. They tell everyone, in the city, in the countryside, and the whole region comes out to see, and what they find is impossible. The man, the screamer, the one they chained and lost and chained and lost and finally abandoned. He is sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind. Someone gave him clothes. Think about that small mercy. Someone in that group looked at him and treated him like a man again. This is the happiest possible ending. a son of their own town, raised from a living death. You would expect celebration, feasting, weeping mothers. Instead, Mark writes, and they were afraid, and they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. They ask him to leave, not because he failed, because he succeeded, and now they have seen what his success costs. 2,000 pigs was somebody's fortune, multiple somebodies, an entire supply chain. Herdsmen, traders, butchers, markets in 10 cities took a catastrophic loss in about 30 seconds. And the whole region does the math, looks at the restored man sitting there, looks at the drowned herd floating in the shallows, and reaches a verdict that should keep you up at night. This man is not worth what he cost. They chose the pigs. Given a choice between a human being made whole and an economy left undisturbed, an entire region chose the economy, and politely asked God to get back in his boat. Before you judge them, be careful. Every generation makes the same trade. Only the livestock changes. We are all tempted to prefer a manageable loss over an unmanageable mercy. And Jesus. This is the part that gets me. Jesus doesn't argue. He doesn't perform 10 more miracles to win the crowd. He honors their terrible request. He turns and walks back to the boat, which brings us to the strangest moment in the entire story. Stay with me, because everything has been building to this. As Jesus is boarding, the healed man comes to him and begs for one thing. Let me come with you. And honestly, of course he does. What is left for him here? His home is a graveyard. His neighbors just voted for the pigs. The only person who ever fought for him is leaving. Every instinct in you says Jesus will look at this man and say what he says to everyone else. Follow me. Jesus says no. Let that land. All through the Gospels, Jesus calls people who hesitate. Leave your nets. Leave your father. Leave the dead to bury the dead. Here is the one man in Scripture who begs to follow, with nothing to leave behind, and he is refused. But listen to what Jesus says instead. Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. Now, here is the part nobody tells you. Everywhere else in Mark's Gospel, Jesus does the opposite. He heals a leper. Say nothing to anyone. He raises a girl from the dead. Tell no one. Scholars call it the messianic secret. In Jewish territory, silence. The crowds there wanted a war king, and Jesus would not feed that fire. But here, on Gentile soil, for the first and only time, the instruction reverses. Don't be quiet. Go. Tell. Do you see what just happened on that beach? Jesus did not deny the man's request to be a disciple. He granted it, at a higher rank than the man asked for. The Apostle Paul, the great missionary to the Gentiles, has not been converted yet. That road to Damascus is years away, which means the first missionary Jesus ever commissioned to the Gentile world was not a scholar, not a fisherman, not a Pharisee. It was a naked man from a graveyard whom everyone had given up on. He asked for a seat in the boat. He was given 10 cities, and Mark says he went and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone marveled. Remember the loop we left open at the beginning? The trip that looked like a failure. One man, one miracle, sent away by the whole region? Turn 2 chapters, Mark chapter 7. Jesus returns to the Decapolis, the same region that begged him to leave. And this time there is no fear, no delegation asking him to go. This time a crowd gathers and keeps gathering until 4,000 people are sitting on a Gentile hillside, so hungry to stay near him that Jesus performs a feeding miracle to keep them from collapsing on the way home. 4,000 people, in the place that once voted for the pigs, who prepared that ground, who spent the in-between years walking from city to city, telling anyone who would listen about the day a king crossed the sea for him. The gospel doesn't spell it out, because it doesn't have to. There was only one preacher assigned to that territory. The seed was one testimony, carried by one man nobody had wanted. The trip was never a failure. It was an invasion of mercy. And it left one soldier behind. So let me bring this off that ancient shore and into your life, because you know this man, not from the Bible, from your own world. Every community has its tombs. The person whose name stopped being used, the addict the family stopped mentioning, the one whose mind broke, whose chains never held, who everyone quietly agreed was too far gone, and the kindest thing left to do was look away. Maybe you have watched someone disappear into that graveyard. Or maybe, And be honest in the dark for a second. Maybe you have been him. Maybe you know exactly what it is to feel occupied by something you never invited in, to hear yourself called a burden, to believe you have been written off by everyone, including God. Then hear this story again. The storm on that lake was not an accident of weather. Something did not want that boat to land. It landed anyway. Jesus of Nazareth crossed open water at night through a storm that terrified professional fishermen. For one person, not a crowd, not a city. One man screaming in a graveyard whom no one else would even approach. Heaven considered him worth the trip. Heaven still keeps that math. So here is what I want you to take from the shore of the Gadarenes. 3 things. First, the fact. The mission to the Gentile world, the movement that would eventually reach your ancestors and mine, did not begin with Paul. It began years earlier, in 10 pagan cities, carried by an unnamed man whose only qualification was a testimony. God's greatest works routinely begin with the people everyone else has counted out. Second, the question. That region was handed a choice between a restored human being and 2,000 pigs, and it chose the pigs. You will be handed the same choice, in quieter forms, for the rest of your life. What mercy is costing you? And what are you asking God to take back on the boat because it disrupted your economy? And third, the one I need you to carry out of this video. There is no graveyard far enough, no chain-breaking strength wild enough, no legion large enough to make Jesus decide you are not worth the storm. The whole region rejected him, and he still left them a witness. He does not give up on the one. He never has. So here is my question for you, and I read these comments. Jesus told that man, "Go home and tell them what the Lord has done for you." If that instruction landed on you today, what would your story be? Tell me below. Someone reading it might be sitting in their own tombs tonight, and your comment might be the boat that reaches their shore. If this opened the story up for you, share it with one person who needs it, and subscribe for more. Because the Bible is not a book of vague morals. It is a record of a God who crosses storms for individuals, even the ones in the graveyard, especially them.